download our Revise It Right revision app for hundreds of videos, quizzes, exam questions, tutor support and so much more. This video is about covalent bonding. Now you'll remember in our previous videos that ionic bonds occur between a metal and a non-metal. And importantly, that in ionic bondings, electrons are transferred. So one atom will lose an electron and the other will gain an electron. They transfer those electrons. Whereas covalent bonding occurs between a non-metal and a non-metal. So these are the elements found on the right-hand side of the periodic table. And the difference, the big difference between covalent bonding is that electrons are actually shared. So there's no losing and gaining of electrons like there is in ionic bonds. They are sharing the electrons. Now you have to be able to represent these as dot cross diagrams and you have to be able to draw them. So I'm going to take you through a few examples of those now and how to do that. So this question is asking us to draw the covalent bond for hydrogen fluoride. Okay, now I've written here a series of steps that we should follow, especially when you're new to doing this, to make sure that you don't miss anything and make sure you get it right. So step 1, write down the chemical formula. Well, the formula is HF, it's given us that in the question. And then write down the atoms you need and how many of them. So hydrogen, there's only one because there's no number after it. So we write hydrogen is 1, and then the F stands for fluorine. And again, there's no number after that, so that must also equal to 1. Draw those atoms, but just the outer shell. Okay, so hydrogen is in group 1, and it's only got 1 electron anyway, so the outer shell of hydrogen looks like this. And then fluorine, it's in group 7, so therefore it has 7 electrons in the outer shell. Now, just like we did with ionic bonds, you represent one as a cross and the other one as a dot, so you don't get confused when you're looking at those electrons. Okay, there we go. So, work out the number of electrons which would need to be shared, i.e., how many electrons do each of them need? Okay, now we can see that to become full outer shell, hydrogen needs only 1. That's because you only need 2 electrons to fill that first outer shell. And fluorine only needs 1. Okay, so they both need 1. So because they both need 1, hydrogen is going to share one of its electrons with fluorine. And fluorine is going to share one of its electrons with hydrogen. Okay, so the way we represent this is as 2 circles like this. Okay, now one side you're going to have hydrogen and on the other you're going to have fluorine. So let's draw the 1 element that they are going to share. So the hydrogen electron that is going to be shared is this one here, and that's the cross, and we draw that in the middle here of the 2 circles. And fluorine also needs to share 1 electron. Okay, remember, because they both need 1, they both therefore need to share 1 each. So that's going to be drawn here, but that time as a circle. Then we need to fill in all the missing electrons. So our hydrogen side, that's it. It's got a full outer shell. There's 2 electrons there, so we've completed that. The fluorine has 2 electrons here, but then we still need to fit in the 6 electrons that come from here. So we're going to fit those around, and remember they're circles because they come from fluorine, like this. Okay, now the best thing to always do is to count them to make sure you got them right. So if we count hydrogen, 1, 2, so hydrogen's now got 2 and that's correct because that's now an outer shell. Now we can count fluorine, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 and therefore that's a full outer shell, so that is also correct. So I am going to now take you. Remember to download our Revise It Right revision app, watch over 700 videos, answer 4,000 plus quiz questions, over 1,000 flashcards, 1,000 exam questions, worksheets, forums, and get help from qualified teachers and so much more. The link is in the description. Through a few more examples. If you would like to pause the video before I took you through those examples to see if you could complete it first, then that might be a good idea. However, if you still don't think that you can, then just watch on, follow me on, and I'll take you through the steps. Okay, so here we go, fluorine gas, which is F2. So write the chemical formula, F2. Write down the atoms that we need. Well, we got fluorine, and we actually need 2 of them. Draw those atoms, just the outer shell. So we just said that fluorine was in group 7, therefore the 7 electrons in the outer shell. And our second fluorine, we're going to represent with a cross this time, so we don't get confused, 7 electrons. So they're the 2 outer shells. Now, step 4, work out the number of electrons which would need to be shared, i.e. to gain that full outer shell. This fluorine obviously needs 1 electron, this fluorine also needs 1 electron. Therefore, they need to share 1 electron each. Okay, so let's share those electrons. Again, we draw our circles, and you will be given this drawing in the exam of the circle, so you do not have to do that. They each share 1 electron, so this is going to be the electron that comes from this fluorine, that's shared from this fluorine, and this is going to be the electron that's shared from this fluorine. So that's the sharing dealt with. Now we need to fill in the blanks. So if we take into account this one, so this one's gone here, that leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fluorines left on that side. So we'll fill them in. Fill them in here. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left on that side. So again, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and fill them in. Do make sure you always do step 6, which is count to make sure you get it right, especially in an exam. There's no point in losing marks because you've counted wrong. So fluorine 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's got 8, which is a full outer shell. Fluorine 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8. Okay, remember these electrons in this circle are electrons that's shared. So the electrons they both have. So you need to count them as both having them. Okay, right, let's go on to another one, which is now nitrogen. And again, if you would like to have a go at this, then please do. So pause the video and do try and have a go. However, nitrogen is slightly different to fluorine, and you will see why in a second. So if you're not sure why, maybe you should listen to me before you start having a go. Okay, so nitrogen. Write down the chemical formula, N2. Write down what atoms you need and how many. So we need nitrogen and we need 2 of them. Draw those atoms, just the outer shell. Okay, so we know that nitrogen is in group 5, so therefore it's going to have 5 electrons in the outer shell. And we're going to draw the second nitrogen, and that's also going to have 5 electrons in the outer shell. Step 4, work out the number of electrons which would need to be shared. Well, to gain a full outer shell, they both need 3. They both need 3 electrons. Okay, so that means they need to share 3 electrons with each other. Okay, so we're going to share the electrons. We're going to draw those shared ones first. So this nitrogen shares its 3, 1, 2, 3, and this nitrogen also shares its 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so they have both now shared 3 electrons each. This is called a triple bond. Okay, so in the fluorine example, they just shared 1 electron. That was a single bond. They're not all that simple, and you need to be aware of that. This is actually a triple bond. Okay, so now we need to fill in the rest. So we've taken out that electron, we've taken out that electron, we've taken out that one, which means there are 2 left on this side. 1, 2. And we've taken out 3 on this side, so 1, 2, 3, we've shared them out, which leaves 2 left on this side. Okay, make sure, that was really rubbish actually, make sure you do draw them properly on the line, because otherwise you just may lose your silly marks. So that was just rushed from me. There you go. Okay, now step 6, I always recommend it, do make sure you count them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shared, 7, 8. So that nitrogen's got 8 and therefore it's full. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shared electrons, 7, 8. So that is also full and that is complete. So I'm going to do one more example, and this one again is slightly different because you can see an uneven amount of atoms for each particular element. So I'm going to teach you how to do that now. Okay, if you would like to have a go, then certainly do try and have a go by pausing the video. But if you would just like to watch me one more time, then please do. Okay, as I said, in the exam you will get given these circles here, so you do not have to be able to draw these. Okay, so you will get given something that looks like that to help you out. So step 1, write down the chemical formula, NH3. Write down what atoms you need and how many of them. So nitrogen, we need 1, and hydrogen, we need 3 of them. Draw those atoms, just the outer shell. So nitrogen, it's in group 5, therefore it's going to have 5 electrons in its outer shell. Hydrogen, we've got 3 of those and they're in group 1. So these have 1 electron in their outer shell. Now, how many electrons do they need? Okay, now this is where this one might get a little bit tricky, but so do follow through. The hydrogens need 1. So these need 1 each to gain a full outer shell, because remember that first outer shell only needs 2 electrons to be full. Whereas the nitrogen needs 3. Okay, so the nitrogen needs 3. That means that the nitrogen is going to share its 1 with each of the hydrogen atoms. Okay, so it's going to share 3 electrons, but 1 each between the 3 hydrogen atoms. Whereas the nitrogen needs 3. So it's going to share the 1 each from each of the hydrogen atoms. Okay, so how do we draw that? Well, these 3s do represent our hydrogen. So let's draw the nitrogen sharing first, because that will make it a little bit more simple. Okay, so let's start with this hydrogen here. We know it has 1 electron, and it's going to share that 1 electron with the nitrogen. And we know that the nitrogen, because we've drawn it here, is going to share 1 of its electrons with the hydrogen. So that's here. We can draw the same with this hydrogen. We know that it's going to share 1 of its electrons, which is across with the nitrogen, and we know it's going to receive and be able to share 1 electron back from the nitrogen, which is there. And the final hydrogen will look exactly the same. It's going to share 1 electron with the nitrogen, and the nitrogen is going to share 1 electron with the hydrogen. Okay, so what does that mean? We've accounted for the 3 crosses now. So that's been accounted for, that's been accounted for, and that's been accounted for. So they are done. We can cross them off. We know we've got them on our diagrams. And we've accounted for 3 circles now. So that's been done, and that's been done. So what that means is there's now only 2 electrons left for that nitrogen atom that we put back on the nitrogen atom. Them ones do not need to be shared, so we put them there. Okay, now that was a little bit more difficult to understand, so I hope you did understand that. But as always, step 6, now make sure we count to make sure we got it right. So let's count this hydrogen first. We need 2 to give it a full outer shell. 1, 2, that's correct. This one here, again, it needs 2 to get a full outer shell. 1, 2, that's correct. This hydrogen here, 2 to get an outer shell. 1, 2, and that is correct. Nitrogen, on the other hand, we know it needs 8 to have a full outer shell. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are shared, 7 and 8. So that is also correct. So now what I'd really like you to have a go at is these examples here, or these questions here. Okay, have a go at drawing out the hydrogen chloride, water, methane, oxygen gas and carbon dioxide, and working through the covalent bonds for them. So pause the video now. Okay, so let's run through these answers. Number 1, what is covalent bonding? Well, covalent bonding is when atoms share electrons. Okay, so covalent bonding is when atoms share electrons. Number 2, what is the difference between ionic bonding and covalent bonding? Well, in ionic bonding, there is a transfer of electrons, whereas in covalent bonding, they share electrons. That is the main difference between them. Also, you could have said that ionic bonding is between a metal and a non-metal, whereas covalent bonding is between a non-metal and a non-metal. And finally, draw these covalent bonds for the following. So hydrogen chloride. Okay, so let's go through these, and I really hope you got these right. So hydrogen has 1 in its outer shell, whereas chlorine, it has 7. So when you went to draw that, hopefully what you drew is that they needed to share 1 each. Okay, and then chlorine had a further 6 to make up that full outer shell. So that's what you should have drawn for hydrogen chloride. Okay, so something that looks like that. So now let's work and do water. Okay, let's do water next. So it needs 2 hydrogen, 1, 2, and it needs 1 oxygen. Now oxygen is in group 6, therefore it has 6 electrons in the outer shell. So oxygen needs 2, whereas the hydrogens only need 1 each. So we know that this oxygen can share 1 with this hydrogen, and this oxygen can share 1 with that hydrogen. And then we know that this hydrogen can share its 1 with the oxygen, and this hydrogen can share this 1 with the oxygen. Okay, so if we draw that out, again you'll get given this particular bit in the exam. So the hydrogen has 1 electron, and it's going to share that with the oxygen, and the oxygen is going to share an electron back with the hydrogen to look like this. The other hydrogen has 1 electron, which it's going to share with the oxygen, and it's going to get 1 back. It's going to share 1 back, which is going to look like that. That's now accounted for this electron, and then 2 of the circles. So it leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, and we fill them in here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that should have been your drawing for H2O. So now let's do methane, which is maybe one of the hardest ones yet, but let's certainly have a go. So carbon, which is in group 6, and therefore it has group 4, and therefore it has 4 electrons in its outer shell. And hydrogen is obviously in group 1, it has 1 electron in the outer shell. So hydrogens need 1, so this carbon is going to share 1 each with each of the hydrogens. I'm going to draw that now. And carbon needs 4, so it's going to share, each hydrogen is going to share its electron. This is a very messy picture, but each hydrogen is going to share its electron with the carbon. Okay, so here would be draw something like, we've got the carbon, we need 4 hydrogens. Okay, so let's start with the hydrogen, as I always think they're easy to do. Hydrogen is going to share 1 electron. This hydrogen here is going to share 1 electron with the carbon, and the carbon is going to share 1 back. This hydrogen is going to share 1, the carbon is going to share 1 back. This hydrogen is going to share 1, the carbon is going to share 1 back. And this hydrogen is going to share 1, and the carbon is going to share 1 back. Now here, all these have now been accounted for, but also all of these have now been accounted for, so we do not have to do any more. We can double check. 1, 2, 1, 2, they're full outer shells. 1, 2, full outer shell. 1, 2, full outer shell. This carbon needs 8, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that carbon has 8, and therefore that is correct as well. Okay, so that is our answer for methane, something that looks like that. So well done actually if you got that one right. That was the hardest one so far, so well done. Now we'll do oxygen, move on to oxygen gas, which is O2. So we need 2 oxygen. Oxygen is in group 6, so 6 electrons in the outer shell. Okay, like this. So they both need 2, which means they need to share 2 with each other. So if we draw them out, this oxygen needs to share 2, and this oxygen needs to share 2 as well. So that means that 1, 2 are gone, and 1, 2 are gone. that leaves 1, 2, 3, 4 left to draw. 1, 2, 3, 4 left to draw. And the other one, 1, 2, 3, 4 left to draw. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Are they full? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, that's got 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, that's got 8. So they are full. So it should look something like that. That is a double bond, a double covalent bond, as they're sharing 2 electrons each. And finally, carbon dioxide. So let's now draw carbon dioxide. Let's rub these out. Get the pen back on. So carbon, we know is in group 4. So it's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's just 1 carbon. And oxygen is in group 6. So it's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But there is 2 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so this one might be a bit of a struggle one, so well done if you got this one. Oxygen needs 2, so both oxygen needs 2. So we know that the carbon atom is going to share 2 with this oxygen and 2 with this oxygen. And the carbon needs 4, so that means it's going to receive 2 from each of the oxygens. So it's going to receive 2 each from them. Okay, so if we put carbon in the middle and then the 2 oxygens on the side, we know, because we just said, that carbon is going to share 2 with each oxygen. So we'll get that in there, 2 with each oxygen. And each oxygen is going to share 2 back. So 2 like this. Okay, and then again, we've got the same again. So this carbon is going to share these 2 with this oxygen. 1, 2. And this oxygen is going to share 2 back. 1, 2. Okay. Now what we need to make sure we do is we need to make sure we fill in whatever electrons are needed. So we've accounted for the 4 crosses from the carbon. So that's down to 3, 4. They're gone. And 2 from the electrons from the oxygen are done. So now we need to make sure we fill in the rest. Okay, so that leaves 4 electrons that we need to fill in for each of the oxygens. So we'll fill them in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now we have 8 electrons in the carbon, and if we counted out the oxygens, 1, 2, 3, 4 that are shared, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they also have 8 each as well. So it should look something like that. Okay, and that should be your answer. So we've now looked at covalent bonding. That is one of the difficult topics in chemistry. So I hope you understood that. If you have, you can really move on to the quiz and the exam questions to really start testing your knowledge. If you haven't, then please do get into contact with one of our tutors and we will happily help.